Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Miedenberg, and I am so excited to have here Dr. Ann Buscho, and she actually wrote this new book, which I thought could be so helpful to parents. It's called The Parent's Guide to Bird Nesting, a child-centered solution to co-parenting during separation and divorce. And as we know, with COVID here, at least we hear the buzz that there's going to actually be an increase in divorce rates following COVID. And the reason for that is people have been obviously cohabitating and with each other 24/7 to some extent when we're socially distancing. So it is leading a lot of people to confront conflict in their relationships, which they may not have, had to deal with before because they could distract and avoid. And this really brings it to the forefront. So without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Ann. And Ann, if you could explain, say anything you want about yourself. And of course, we really want to know what bird nesting is, because that is a unique word. And I know, for example, I come from a divorced family. My parents were divorced when I was 3, very young age. And they had a very specific way of coordinating visits and all of that. And it's changed and evolved over the years. So I'm really curious to hear, what new ways that we found have been really helpful for kids, particularly. So I'm turning it over to you.
So thank you. So I'm a psychologist in Northern California. I've been in practice for several decades, working with families going through divorce primarily. And I'm a child of a high conflict divorce, so I wanted to try to protect families, especially children, from having to go through a high conflict divorce. So I work a lot as a collaborative divorce coach, working with attorneys and financial specialists to help people get divorced without going to court, and hopefully leaving their divorce process in better shape than they came into it, with enough friendship to be able to co-parent after they're divorced. So I wrote this book because 27 years ago, when I got divorced, our therapist suggested that we nest. It was just called nesting. And she had no idea how to do it other than the children stay in one place and the parents take turns taking care of them. Mm-hmm. So with that much information, we set out to try to nest. We nested for 15 months, and I learned a lot along the way. We made a lot of mistakes. They were all very good lessons. And, but overall, I think it was a really good experience for our kids to be able to stay in one place with their routines not disrupted while my ex and I figured out what we were going to do. We ultimately got divorced, and we nested until our divorce was finished. That was how we chose to end. During COVID, it's been really interesting because before COVID, if people wanted to nest, it was a voluntary process, right? They could choose to nest or not. But during COVID, people are nesting involuntarily. They're being forced to nest without any guidance. And if their marriage was stressed before COVID hit, but they hadn't gotten to the place of wanting to separate yet, it certainly escalated once they were sort of shut down and locked in with each other. So a lot of the clients I'm seeing now are people that have been forced to nest. They haven't chosen to nest. The key to nesting successfully, is to have some very well-defined agreements, very clear, spelled out agreements that are written down, documented, and agreed to by both parents. And they have to be detailed, and I can promise that without that, the nesting can be kind of a disaster. So the reason I wrote the book was I had written a blog about it about 6 years ago, and the publisher came to me and said, "There's nothing out there about nesting. We saw your blog, will you write the book?" And that's how the book came to be. And it's a step-by-step guide to help people establish a nesting relationship, a nesting arrangement, and a parenting plan that really works for their family. So that's the definition.
Yeah. And just a quick question, because I know you said that formatively it was called nesting, and I noticed in your title it's called bird nesting. So is there a reason why that term has transformed, I guess?
I don't think it's changed. I think on the East Coast it's known as bird nesting, and on the West Coast it's known as nesting. And I know when the publisher came up with the title, I said it's going to be put in the ornithology section of bookstores, and can't we call it something else? But that's what it is. It's bird nesting in the East Coast and nesting out here. So in the book, because I'm a West Coast person, I don't think I use the word bird nesting even once in the book. So it's just nesting.
Okay. Yeah. I was curious about that, if there was something, specific about that. So it sounds like a really humane, I'll call it humane way, of really being thoughtful and mindful of both children and parents. And I wonder, because it sounds like it's really more child focused and child centered. But I'm also thinking that, so would it be where parents, again, the children would stay in one home and the parents would transition outside of the home? Or because I know some people have it where they're actually both living in the home.
Yeah, yeah, that's happening more with COVID, and it's certainly not ideal. It's if people have the budget to support an off-site place for the off-duty parent to go, that's way better. But there are people who are nesting in the home, meaning that when one parent is on duty, the other parent is in a different part of the house, maybe in the bedroom. I've had clients convert basements, garages, attics to kind of separate spaces. But it is more challenging when the parents are in the home. It's confusing for the children because they know mom or dad is in their bedroom, but they're not supposed to go there or something. So it's a separate agreement I have to work with parents about how they're going to handle that. So it truly benefits the children to have that stability, that their routines don't change very much, and that they get used to having one parent at a time. But it's also a huge benefit for parents because it gives them the separation, the break from the conflict that they really need, so they can settle down emotionally and figure out what they want to do next. They can take care of themselves. They can maybe get therapy. They have, on their off-duty time, they have an opportunity to connect with friends. Maybe if they have to go back to work, they have to figure that out. So it is a huge benefit for parents to have that respite. They also learn about going back and forth because eventually the kids are going to have to go back and forth. And or that's most likely. And so because the parents have had that experience of coming on and off duty, they're going to be a little more empathic when their children forget their homework at the other parent's house or something like that. So I actually think it's really good for parents to have that experience. And finally, I think it benefits parents because it gives them an opportunity to get up to speed as a solo parent. So when parents are working together, there's a division of labor. In a marriage, there's a division of labor. Maybe one person is more responsible for cooking and the other is maybe more responsible for maintenance in the house. And now each parent has to do all of it when they're on duty. So they have to take some time to get up to speed.
Yeah. Do you find, because again, I know there's also arrangements where outside of the home, there are two separate dwellings, like two dwellings. And then sometimes, the one who's off duty stays in a singular dwelling, and they're respectful of keeping things neat and et cetera. And I guess that's a more cost effective way, but I would also expect that some people want their own individual space that's not invaded by another person, especially somebody they may have conflict with.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways to set up a nesting arrangement, including staying in the home, but also when off duty, staying with friends or relatives. I've had people stay in Airbnbs. I had one client who stayed in his office on a fold out sofa. If parents are able to get along well enough to share an offsite, let's say studio apartment, that works well. If there's the budget for it, having two offsite places is even better. When my ex and I nested, I rented a room in a house with 4 other roommates, and he stayed with his girlfriend when he was off duty. It worked out so that people can be creative. They just need to find a place where they have their own space and they have privacy. And if they're sharing a space with their spouse, they have to understand about the condition that the place should be left in when they leave. That means changing the linens and making sure there's no dishes in the sink and that the garbage isn't overflowing.
So I had one more question,
Yeah.
because I'm wondering also, is there any, particular research or, that indicates that this is, again, more therapeutic or a better arrangement for kids, or the family for that matter, right? Like, why would somebody opt to do this as opposed to something else, to have kids move back and forth or,
Mm,
I'm just curious.
yeah. Actually, I have not seen any research, but it's funny that you asked because I had an interview yesterday from a researcher at Oxford in England who is researching this. So I'm very excited to see what she comes up with. However, what the research does say is that the most damaging thing about divorce for children is conflict between the parents. And what I know in working with many families is that I've never met parents who don't tell me we want what's best for the kids. We want this, whatever our decisions are to be in their best interest. We both love the kids. It's the one area where they really agree, even if they differ on everything else. So nesting gives them the opportunity to protect their children from the fallout of the divorce while giving them a peaceful home. They're no longer having to live in the, the emotional kind of stress of conflict in the family. So I don't have any data to back it up, but I would guess, and I think my experience in working with many people is that it gives everyone some time. That time to adjust and adapt is important. It's helpful. It's way less shocking to children to have to suddenly go back and forth between two homes when they didn't make the decision to divorce. That wasn't their idea.
Yeah.
So, parents can take the burden of the divorce at least for a while until everyone adapts.
I think that's a great point. I know for myself, even today as an adult, when I have to pack to go away, even if it's to vacation or somewhere exciting, I
Yeah,
literally have a visceral response to it. I
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
It's
we
like
went back and forth.
it's a little bit of dread of like, there's something that definitely negative that kind of gets associated with packing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. So thank you so much. This sounds like such a I mean, I'm even surprised that a book like this hasn't been written before. I have to be honest with you,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it sounds so practical and so, so important.
And
Um,
it's been around for so many years, but people still don't know about it. I
yeah.
mean, when we did it, it was 27 years ago. So 27 years later, it's still a new concept for most people. And the people that do know about it will tell me sort of horror stories because they did not have the agreements that you need to make it successful. And that's everything from how it's going to be funded, whether you're going to bring dates or new relationships into the home, agreements about home maintenance, agreements about what your next steps will be and when nesting will end. So identifying the milestone when nesting will end. Maybe it's when the divorce is done or the house is sold or the children are all out of high school, or it could be any milestone. And you don't necessarily know that at the beginning, but in our situation, my ex gave me very little notice that he wanted me out of the house because he wanted to have his girlfriend move in. So one of the agreements I really urge people to make now is, can you agree to give your co-parent 90 days notice before you end nesting? That's
Mm,
important. That's respectful. It lets everyone sort of organize the next stage.
that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yep.
And we learn from our experiences often, right?
Yep.
Yes. So thank you so much. Any last things? Again, I think this is such a practical book, and I think anybody who's even considering separating a divorce, it's a must read, it sounds like. Yeah. Any
I think,
last any last things? And if you wanted to share your website, of course, for resources for people.
first of all, I would say that yes, it's a guidebook to nesting, but if even people who decide not to nest will get a lot of value out of the
Mm,
book because it's a lot about how you deal with separation and divorce and parenting and how you can recover. So there's a lot about self-care. There's a lot about budgeting,
mm,
and how to co-parent, even if you're co-parenting from two homes. So I
okay.
think it's a useful book for anyone considering separation or divorce. So my website is all about nesting right now. So I actually have two websites, but the website about nesting is just drannbuscho.com, and that's drannbuscho.com. And people will find excerpts there. There's a blog, and there's a lot about what are the benefits and how do you do it.
And I will definitely include that when I post it, for people who didn't readily get that, but I'll include it.
Sure.
So thank you so much for being here and for, talking us through this and for offering your expertise.
Oh,
I'm sure it's going to be of value to so many people. So thank you.
Yeah. My goal in life is to protect children from the damage of divorce. And so the more I can get the word out, the better. So I'm happy to share this with people.
Yeah, and thank you. I know when I was younger, it probably would have been very useful as well. So
Yep.
thank you for that.
You're welcome.